The Witness the World podcast represents the personal views of the host and guests at the time of recording. These views may change over time. The content here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any content here should not be construed as financial, medical, or any other type of professional advice. Please consult with a qualified practitioner should you require any professional advice. Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode 1 of the Witness the World podcast. My name is Ben Choi, and I'll be taking us on a journey to the United States of America today. Our guest is a former collegiate athlete who's worked in both the private and public sector, most notably with the Cincinnati Police Department as a SWAT team negotiator. He's also a cancer warrior, motivational speaker, and author. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bennett. Congratulations on the inauguration of your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor to have you on. So when you reached out to me and told me a little bit about yourself, I was intrigued about the wide range of experiences you've had in your life. This podcast is looking to connect with people from around the world that have persevered through all different types of adversity and are an inspiration to others. So after reading a little bit about you, hearing a bit about you, about the podcast that you've been on, I knew you'd be a terrific first guest. So to kick things off for the first part of the podcast, I was thinking it would be great for everyone to hear a little bit about your roots growing up, going through college, your first couple of jobs, then finally landing with the Cincinnati Police Department.
Sure. So I grew up pretty much in Chicago, although I spent a little time in Columbus, Ohio, in between that. I am the oldest of 3 boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball at the Citadel, which is a military college in Charleston, South Carolina. I have a brother who's 6'7", who was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame. Another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers and the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So I sort of joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, there wasn't a prayer's chance you were going to see anything, that was going on in front. But our 5'8" mother, was always the boss. Whatever mom said, that's the way it went. And of course, mom was gone a lot. You can imagine having, 4 men in the house with ravenous appetites. She was always at the store getting milk or meat or something like that. Went to college, as I said, at the Citadel. First person in my family to graduate from college. And I remember graduating and thinking, I'm all ready to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. And I look back now and realize how little I knew about business just because I had a degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. Unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. You've touched a little bit on my professional experience, so I won't go into that anymore. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for almost 30 years. We have 1 child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's quite an experience there. Thanks for that summary there, Terry. So I guess, first thing I wanted to ask you, I mean, you worked in the corporate area, Wendy's, different jobs there, like to go to policing, that's kind of a big switch there. Just wondering, what went into your decision to do that big switch of careers?
Yeah, you're right. If you kind of look at my resume, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, on the surface. But there's sort of a backstory. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954, and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, taking a homicide suspect back to the lockup. But my dad always remembered the stories that my grandmother told. My dad was an infant when this happened, but he remembers the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to go to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my father wanted me to do. And so when I graduated from college, I had a decision to make. As I mentioned, my dad was sick. So I could have either said, sorry, Dad, I know you're sick, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail and I'm going to get into law enforcement. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do and go into business. So my first two jobs are in business out of love and respect for my father. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited until my father passed away, and then I followed my dreams. Now, I did it rather late in life. I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. But it was always a passion for me and something I wanted to do. And, it may have been late in life, but at least I got to follow my passion.
Wow. Okay, that's an interesting journey there. So, just wondering, yeah, police work, it's yeah, there's a lot of, challenging situations, tough situations. Just wondering if you could share, what was like the toughest, incident or situation or assignment that you've had to, be on during your policing career. And I know you've been on the SWAT team negotiating, so it could be that, or maybe just in some other capacity there. Yeah, I just wonder if you can share a little bit about that.
Sure. So, I started out, I went through the police academy. I started out for the first 4 years of my career in a marked car, in uniform, answering radio runs and doing things like that. And after that, I got into the drug unit. And most people kind of laugh when I say that. It's like, wait a minute, you're 6'8". How could you possibly have, done undercover narcotics work and stuff like that? But I always tell people that, illicit drugs, that industry, and let's face it, it is an industry, is motivated by greed. So if you have money, somebody will sell you drugs. And so, we did a little bit of acting. I remember there was one time I was working the night shift. My old partner, who, when I was in uniform, she and I worked together. We were in the academy together. She was working the day shift, and she said, "Hey, I've got these 4 kids coming down from Dayton, Ohio, which is almost a suburb of Cincinnati. They want to sell you mushrooms, and then they want to go party in Cincinnati. Will you buy from them?" And I'm like, yeah, okay. So, you kind of have to have a little bit of a backstory. I'm like, well, what are you going to tell them? And it's like, well, what do you want to be? I said, well, I think I'll be a professor of metallurgy from the University of Cincinnati. I don't know anything about metal other than, you put it out in the rain and it rusts, the kind of thing. So I said, but that's what I'll do. And I'll meet him. Let's set it up for a park. So we set it up for a park that night. And these kids, they pull up right next to me, right on time. Kid gets out, jumps into the car, shows me the mushrooms. I give them the $200, and they get back in the car, and they're immediately swarmed by, marked cars and unmarked cars and officers. So instead of partying in Cincinnati, they were guests of the Hamilton County Justice Center that night for, trafficking in drugs. So, that was kind of an interesting story. I was shot at a couple times in the drug unit when we were buying dope and stuff like that. That obviously, kind of changes your perspective on life a little bit. As a hostage negotiator, I'll give you a couple of funny stories. Well, one funny and one kind of true. I had been working this particular night when the call came out, so I got to the scene fairly early, and I asked the officers on scene what was going on. They said, well, this guy's drunk. He's taken his wife hostage. He's got a gun. He's barricaded them in the house. Like, okay, do you have him on the phone? It's like, yeah. So I take the phone and I start talking to him. And usually during a negotiation, you don't ask early in the negotiation for the person to come out or let the hostage go or anything like that. But I just kind of had a feeling at this point in time. So I said to him, what would it take for you to come out right now? And there was a long pause on the end of the line. And he said, give me a beer. I said, if I got you a beer, do I have your word that you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, absolutely, you have my word, but do I have your word you'll let your wife go and come out? He said, yeah. So I gave $5 to one of the officers. I said, go down to the store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch. I called them back and I said, hey, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out, you put the gun down, and you come out. He said, do I still have your word I can drink it? I said, you still have my word. All of a sudden, the front door flies open. Here comes his wife. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink the beer, and off to jail he goes. So that was kind of a funny one. They don't usually go that way. This one I'll tell you about is a little more serious. This individual wanted to commit suicide. He wanted to kill himself. And it started probably at 8 o'clock at night, and he slit his wrists, and that didn't work. And for some reason, he thought it was a good idea to turn the gas on in his stove and stick his head in the oven. And that didn't work either. And he called a family member and he said, you know what, I'm really down. I'm going to kill myself. They called the police. We get there. I'm talking to him. And it's probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning now. And he has a gun. And I think I just warmed down. He was tired. And he said, you know, I'd like to come out. I said, that would be great. If you would come out, I said, I'll come down to the scene. I'll talk to you. You know, we'll get this all worked out. I said, but put the gun down, but bring the phone with you. He hung up the phone, which isn't uncommon because we're conditioned that when a call is over that we hang up the phone. But about 30 seconds later, one of the tactical officers comes on the radio and says, we heard a gunshot. And I thought, oh my gosh, you didn't shoot yourself. He did, shot himself in the head, but he shot himself at such an angle that the bullet went underneath his skin on his temple, around his scalp, and came out the other side. Never penetrated his skull, never got to his brain. So 3 times this individual tried to kill himself. 3 times God said, nope, don't think we want you today. You stay down there for a while.
Wow. I think that guy needs to probably go to the casino or something with that.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, buy a lottery ticket or something.
Wow. Wow. Those are some amazing stories there, Terry. Yeah, like those kind of, stories, kind of really, kind of leave you with like a lasting impression, I think, with like the role itself. And that's kind of what I want to jump into next here. So in my other line of work, I'm in the banking industry, and I've interacted with a lot of law enforcement staff, and I've heard all sorts of stories, from the basic stuff you kind of touched on to some really intense stuff, which you also touched on. The underlying theme that I got from all those interactions I had with the officers is that policing career can really leave like a lasting impression on you and your views on, for people and the world as a whole. It could be very, very positive or negative. So just wondering, in your situation, like what's the most like, the lasting impression you've had like on people and society, just like through your experience with the Cincinnati Police Department?
I think you have to remember, or at least I try to remember, that everybody is a person. I don't care how bad of a person you are, and I've dealt with some pretty bad people, but somewhere somebody loves that person. And you always remember that as a police officer. Now, I may do a traffic stop and pull your car over, and you have contact with me. Now, for me, it's the 3rd traffic stop of the night. For that person, it's the scariest thing that's happened to them all year. So you kind of have to remember that within the context of your job, you still have a job to do. You still have to enforce the law. You still have to protect yourself and your partner and make sure everybody's safe, and you go home at the end of your shift. But as long as those things are covered, it's real important to remember that you're dealing with people. And usually you're dealing with people, especially when I was a negotiator, probably having the worst day of their life. When you've got your house surrounded by the police and you're talking to a police negotiator, you're not having a good day. So you have to remember that these are people, and you do everything you can to connect with them and things like that. But at the end of the day, I still have a job to do. But I didn't get callous. I didn't get, everybody's a jerk, or, everybody hates the police. I think the vast majority of people like the police. The vast majority of people want the police around. The people who are the most vocal, and I think this is true in any political climate, the people on the far left and the people on the far right are always the ones that get the microphone. And it's the 90% of the people in the middle that are like, no, we want common sense kind of things in our lives. We want law and order. We want the things that keep us safe and protected, and we want you to do that. But you don't hear about that. You hear about the fringe people who are always yelling and screaming that, we got to have $1 million for every police officer, or, we should defund the police. There's most people are in the middle. And I think in your introductory video, you talk about how life is lived in the gray. And that's where life is lived. And that's where most of us live. But the fringes are really kind of what the media picks up on and stuff like that. So I love being a cop. I couldn't wait to go to work, but I'll leave you with this thought. If your job was you made less money than a plumber, everybody you came in contact with didn't want you around, and also everybody you contacted lied to you, how long would you do that job? How long would you do, that? How could you wait to get up in the morning and go do that? And that's what law enforcement is. You make less money than a plumber. Nobody wants you there. It's never a good thing when the police are involved. And everybody lies to you because they want you to think that their situation was the one you believe, and you'll take the other person to jail. So that's your job every day. You have to have a calling. You have to have a desire to make a difference in your community if you want to be successful in that line of work.
Wow, that's a great answer here. And I think you kind of hit off a lot of things there, then kind of rolls into my next question here, which is, touch on like the mentality with some people, saying that all cops are bad, the defund the police thing. I mean, that's a loud voice, but in my personal opinion, I think it's a minority opinion, because at the end of the day, if no cops were around, who's going to help me out if, there's violence being perpetrated against me, or, there's property destruction in my place. Who's going to come for me? And that counter argument, it's not really balanced, I think, enough with the other voices that have been coming out, especially the last couple of years. So I guess my next thing is I'm just kind of curious for your experience in the industry, like where do you think this conversation goes from here? Because we've heard, that vocal minority, and there's some voices that, want to talk about the other side, not as strongly. It just is, like, the voices are being kind of restrained. But where do you see this going? Like, is there going to be some balance? Is there going to be some common sense, cooler heads are going to prevail? I'm just wondering, where do you think things go from here?
I do think that, I'm old enough that I've seen, the pendulum swing all the way to the right and then sort of swing back all the way to the left. So, I've kind of seen that go on. I think during COVID, it really, it locked us down, and it gave us an opportunity to hide behind our devices. It gave us an opportunity to get out there, and say, oh, hey, it's 3:00 in the morning tomorrow. No, it's 3:00 in the morning today. No, it's tomorrow, and you have to believe me. And you can't possibly disagree with me. And all this wokeness of, wait a minute, where did common sense come? Where did that go? But when people, especially when I talk to young people, they get bullied. They get bullied electronically. Somebody will say something. Hey, I don't like your hair. I didn't like what you were wearing at school today, or you're ugly, or you're stupid, or you're whatever. Those things only hurt if you allow them into you. You should just be like Superman. Somebody says something stupid like that to you, it hits you and it bounces right off. It only impacts you if you allow it to impact you. And so I think now that things are opening up and people aren't able to hide behind their devices and aren't able to say nasty things to people over the internet or their devices that they certainly wouldn't say to them in person, I think now we're kind of coming back where the pendulum is swinging more towards the middle. And I think eventually we'll get to a point where cooler heads will prevail. We understand that we can't defund the police. You can, but you made the same comment. And I'll give you an example, because I still have friends in Cincinnati. When I took the police test, there were 3,500 people that took the test that were competing for 100 slots, two classes of 50 each. And today, Cincinnati is trying to fill a class of 60. 600 people took the test. They're down to the point now, they started the academy with like 45 people. So they don't even have enough people to fill the entire complement that they're able to fill, because not enough people want to do that job anymore. when you keep telling people they're bad and, we can't trust you, you have no character, you have no integrity, who's going to want to do that job? And the people that do want to do that job are not the people you want doing that job. You want your best and brightest in that to be in that kind of a role. And people just aren't doing that. They can make a whole lot more money with a whole lot less aggravation doing other things. So I think the pendulum will swing back to the middle where common sense will prevail, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your insights there, Terry. So, I mean, you touch on, some points about, how there's public have lost trust like in institutions, but also, I think people that, wanted to get a career, in policing, I think they've kind of lost trust because of society. So it kind of goes both ways. Yeah. So I'm just kind of curious, like, how do we rebuild this trust? It's not just where policing, it's all institutions as well, whether it's like the political system, financial system, medical system, even media organizations. Like a lot of the trust has been eroded over the years. And so yeah, just wondering, with your law enforcement lens and also as a private citizen, like just how do we go back and regain trust, in our public institutions? I don't know if you have any great ideas, but hey, I'd love to hear them.
I don't know if I have any great ideas, but I can really kind of talk a little bit about law enforcement. And I don't want to sit here and say, that all this is the problem of the public. It's not. I mean, law enforcement certainly has their share of blame to go around. And I think part of it is we don't do a very good job in law enforcement of articulating why we do something. For example, I remember one night we were looking for a particular vehicle that was involved in an armed robbery, and two other officers had pulled a car over that matched the description. It ended up not being the people we were looking for. And so, you can imagine if you were in that car, it's like, well, why did you stop me? What did I do? And these officers were like, I don't need to tell you why I stopped you. You're not the people, you can go. And that's leaving a bad taste in your mouth. Why wouldn't you go up to the car? And my partner and I ended up doing that because we came to back him up. Like, look, we were looking for a car that matched your description. You guys are not the car we're looking for. We appreciate your cooperation. Thank you for your time. Have a safe night. You're free to go. Well, when you tell somebody that, okay, now I understand why you pulled me over. My car matched the description of somebody you were looking for. Why wouldn't you tell the person that? I mean, do you have to tell them that? No, you don't. But why wouldn't you? Why would you want to leave them with a bad taste in their mouth that allowed them to be like, oh, the cops just pulled me over because I was black or because I was Hispanic or because I was a woman or whatever, however you want to look at that. When the real case was, no, I didn't pull you over for that. I pulled you over for a specific reason. Share that reason with the individuals. So I think part of it is our own fault in law enforcement. We don't do a good job of articulating why we do what we do. I mean, there are sometimes, obviously, if it's a high danger situation, you've got to do what you got to do. You got to yell and scream. You got to get people out at gunpoint. You got to handcuff them. But once everything is settled down, then you have an opportunity to explain to people why you did what you did. And I find that when you do that, people understand. Oh, okay, I get it. And if we stopped you and we arrested you and you're not the person, those handcuffs come off just as easily as they go on, and you will get an apology. You always got an apology from me. So I think part of it is articulating why you do what you do. And the other thing is I think we need to start talking about values in this country. What's important to us? What are we willing sort of to die for? Everybody talks about goals and, New Year's resolutions and all that kind of stuff. Why do all those fail? Because they're not based on any kind of value, something that you hold near and dear to your heart. I mean, I'm not saying all politicians are bad, but so many of them get caught, with their hand in the cookie jar. And so I really think we need to start bringing values back into what this country was all about. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We need to improve. But I really think we need to sort of have a foundation to which we grow this country from.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks for those insights there, Terry. So I guess, yeah, you kind of touched on, I guess maybe it's personal accountability, it sounds like, for the particular police officers. And so that kind of leads into my next question is that everyone knows about that, that horrible incident in Uvalde, Texas. And yeah, it sounds to me as, someone that's in Canada, I get like a different look at things at whole different angles here and just kind of let it kind of, flow and then see what the takeaways are. Like to me, it seems like, yeah, like this is like kind of like a microcosm of like the policing system, like as a whole there. You touched on some elements that maybe, yeah, some personal accountability, some political dynamics there. And also, yeah, like we talked about, lack of funding, maybe a lack of training. And so, I mean, there's all sorts of special interests involved sometimes too. But I mean, it's always like a combination of all these factors and, people, making a mistake, oh, you know what? So maybe we made a mistake on the road, like you were saying, if it happens there. So maybe a lack of tact or tone or etiquette, maybe. And I think like a combination of all these things are kind of results some of the challenges that I guess the United States, and not just the United States, there's other countries have these challenges as well. But so with all that said, and it's a very complex problem, I think it needs a very complex solution. So just throwing this out there and looking at this a different way, if you were, let's say, the president of the United States and you had the power to do a couple of things to get the ball rolling, to change the dynamics, just change the way we look at things on how we deal with these problems, like the policing situation, that like, what were the first couple of things that you would try to do to kind of, turn the tide, I guess, so you would say?
I look back on my police career, and I've always said that if you didn't have alcohol, drugs, and mental illness, you would not need nearly as many police officers as you do. And we have not done a very good job. And I don't know what the solution is. There are people that are much smarter than I am that have been trying to deal with mental illness, that have been trying to deal with homelessness, that have been trying to deal with addiction and things like that for years. And I remember I did a podcast with a couple of cadets at the Air Force Academy a couple of years ago, and one of them asked me about my time in the drug unit and asked me, are there programs out there? Are there services out there to help people with addiction? And I said, absolutely. There are absolutely those services out there. I said, but those services seem to me to only be effective when the addicted person really gets to, their lowest point. They're at the bottom of I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I told him, I said, there's a very fine line between being at the bottom and being dead. And so, you have to get pretty low. And I won't go into some of the things that I've seen in crack houses and in drug houses and things like that are just absolutely disgusting about what people will do when they're addicted, how they sell their bodies and things like that. But, we need to do a better job of helping these people. Again, we need to do a better job. But you can't lock them up. The Supreme Court here in the United States says, no, you can't lock up somebody that's mentally ill. They have a right to walk around talking to themselves all day long. You can't lock them up. Well, what does an addicted person do? I have a good friend of mine in high school who lives out in California here in the US with his wife. This is his second wife. His second wife has a daughter who's addicted to cocaine. Now, she tries to break into their house to steal things, to buy drugs. But not only does she do that, she tells her friends where her mom and stepfather live, and they come to the house and try to break in and steal things so they can get money for drugs. Can you imagine being the parent of somebody who is addicted, who you can't help? People have to want to help themselves, and people that are mentally ill they just can't. They don't take their medications, they don't get the right treatment and things like that. Like I said, I don't know what the solution is. Smarter people than me have tried to deal with this thing, but I really think that, addiction and mental illness are two huge problems that we need to deal with here in the United States.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that answer, Terry. So I guess the next kind of area I want to touch on, I mean, it kind of leads into this whole mental illness and just kind of working on oneself, I guess, mental self, and the adversity behind it. And I mean, start off, want to talk a little bit about some of the personal adversity that has challenged you over the years after your policing career. And so, I mean, when I went to your website, and I heard about some of the stuff on your podcast, I mean, like you've gone through cancer, challenge with with your leg, and it's kind of, it's been an ongoing battle, for you over the years. And but the thing is, you kind of turn this into like almost like this adversity has become energy for you to kind of fuel you to this next chapter of your life here. And I mean, I just think to myself, hey, if Terry can, be a motivational speaker, battle cancer, write a book. I mean, like, there's so much more that me and everybody else can do in their lives, and you just kind of, exemplify, that yeah, you can do so much more and be this better version of yourself. And so I just kind of want to jump into that a little bit. Maybe you can just tell us a little about your journey, I guess, on this chapter 2, I guess, of your life here after policing, and where things are at today.
Sure. So, 2012, I had started my own school security consulting business, and I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas. And I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sack with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. And so finally, he just kind of laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma. And most of us think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun and it affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. But you have a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because your cancer is so incredibly rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And so I did. I had the tumor excised on the bottom of my foot, had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And then when I healed, my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. The side effects of interferon were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And like I said, that was not a cure. That was, as my oncologist used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road and buy you more time for more therapies to become available. After I'd been on the interferon for 5 years, I had to stop it because it became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which usually is not compatible with being alive. But fortunately, I was able to be stabilized by literally being packed in ice to try to reduce my body temperature. And I had to stop the drug. And the cancer came back almost immediately in the exact same area on my foot where it had presented 5 years ago. 2018, I had my left foot amputated because of that. The cancer worked its way up my leg into my shin. 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in my ankle area, in the bottom of what was left of my leg, grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse right in the middle of the COVID pandemic was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I am still being treated for. And I know this sounds like a really ugly and depressing journey, and it certainly has been. But I'll tell you this much. I don't think you really understand or you know yourself until you've been tested by adversity. And secondly, I think cancer has made me a better human being.
Wow, that's quite a story there. And there's a lot of people that wouldn't take that view on things, adversity, being, a positive thing, I guess, in a way, right, on certain aspects. And so I guess is that how you kind of spurred yourself on to do I guess, the motivational work, write a book? I'm just wondering at what point during this journey there you had the idea, like, this is what I want to do. I want to be do some motivational speaker, help people out, and write a book. I mean, like, at what point did that thought kind of get into your mind?
Well, it's funny because people were suggesting, you should write a book, and I was really kind of pushing it off. I'm like, I'm not a writer. I'm not. And there's kind of that old saying that when we talk, it's not a saying, it's kind of a joke. When we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never said, never talked to me, never or anything like that. But I think what God does, at least in my mind, at least in my experience in my life, is that he puts people in your path that continue to make the same suggestion. And it's up to you whether you want to do that or not. It's up to you whether it's, yeah, I think maybe I ought to perk up and listen to this, and maybe this ought to be the road I want to go on. Or, you know what? No, I don't want to do that. I want to go over here and do my own thing. And, I mean, we're not going to get into a big discussion on religion, but I think that goes to free will. God lets you do what you want to do, but I think God sort of guides you and directs you. And so when enough people started saying, hey, Terry, you got to write a book. No, I don't think so. And then another person, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to pay attention to this. But going back to when I started, I mean, I certainly experienced all the emotions that we would associate with grief. When I found out I had cancer, I mean, first it was denial. It's like, wait a minute, no, I can't possibly have cancer. And then you get mad. It's like, no, this isn't right. And then you start to bargain. If you believe in God, you start to bargain. Our daughter was in high school when I was diagnosed, and I really was like, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then you kind of get down. And then, at least for me, I got to a point where, well, I don't like this. This, for lack of a better word, this sucks. But I have to embrace the suck. I have to realize that these are the cards that I've been dealt. I don't like these cards, but I'm going to have to play this hand to the best of my ability. And I made a conscious decision very early on in my cancer journey that I was never going to take this out on a family member, a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, anybody that was trying to help me. It wasn't their fault I got cancer. I just got it. And so now I've got to deal with it. And these people are trying to help me. And I've seen a lot of people during my cancer, it's been over 10 years now, that, they're so infuriated, they're so upset that they take it out on the nurses, they take it out on the doctor. And it's like, why are you doing that? I mean, these people are here to help you. They didn't give you the cancer. They didn't do anything. They're here to help. But you're so in your head. You are so focused on you that the only thing you can do is lash out at other people. And I just made a decision early on. I wasn't going to do that.
Wow. It sounded like there's that moment you had, like, light bulb, the epiphany moment, and that kind of just propels you to this kind of like new mindset, this personal growth mindset, and carried you on to the book and all sorts of stuff, and your personal development stuff, which I want to talk to you a little bit next here. So I guess in general, like, for, when people talk about self-motivation, personal growth, some people have like challenges with that. I mean, like, I think a good example is, you New Year's resolutions. I want to lose the winter weight, and you get going for, 2-3 weeks, and then it kind of fall off the wagon. And then now, with things like mental illness becoming like so prevalent out there, everyone seems like has dealt with it in some form, shape, or another. Like, it's a real challenge just to get through, to make sustainable, motivational personal growth for the long term in the best of times. But now, with all the mental health kind of issues, it makes it even more daunting. So just curious, like, yeah, like, from what you've seen for yourself and people that you've worked with, like what's like kind of like the best way to get that sustainable growth and sustainable excellence, for motivational, like, growth? And is it just like a matter of, finding that moment from within, maybe having a good support group, perhaps, it's just, having like a team? I'm just curious, like, what do you think is like the best way of going about that to achieve it?
I guess let me state this up front because I think it's incredibly important. You know, there are people that need mental health professionals, and I am not one. You know, so if you feel you need to talk to somebody, if you feel you might need medication or you're prescribed medication, I don't want to take it. Please do that. Please take it. Please help yourself. There's nothing wrong. I think the most courageous people in the world that admit they have a problem and then do something to correct that problem. I mean, all these people that are like, oh, I don't have an issue. Yeah, you have an issue. Take responsibility for yourself and help yourself along that line. Now, that's one group. And what I talk about is not those people that need professional help to get through their day. What I'm talking about are people who, they're kind of in that boat where, well, I'm just sort of directionless. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's going on with my life. I have no goals. I have no aspirations. I have no ambitions. I'm in pain, whether it's physical pain, whether it's emotional pain, whether it's mental pain, whatever it is. I mean, we're all going to experience pain in our lives. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and feel sorry for yourself? One of the things that I was fortunate enough to learn, I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played all the way up until I graduated from college. So team sports taught me a great deal. And it taught me something because I was in sports. It doesn't have to be sports. It's whatever your team is, your family, you're in a play, you're in a band, whatever you do, where you're around other people. And what team sports taught me was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize that on a team, that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And Ben, I don't want to sit here and say, I've got all the answers. You're looking at me right now. There's no S on my chest. I don't have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I have bad days. I have days where I cry. I have days where I get down. I have days where I feel sorry for myself. So I understand when people feel that way. But when I do that, I'm reminded of two stories. One was a story that I read about in the 1950s with a professor at Johns Hopkins University here in the United States who did a very simple experiment. He took rats and he put rats in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he put those exact same rats in that exact same tank of water the second time. And on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Think about that. First time, 15 minutes. Not only am I not going to be successful, I'm going to die. It's over. I'm going to die 15 minutes. Second time around, 60 hours, which taught me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives. We have to believe that maybe not this week, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but sometime down the road, if we keep doing what we're doing, or if we change and improve what we're doing, our life will get better. And number two, just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. I have a friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL, some of the toughest men in the world. And the SEALs talk about their 40% rule, which basically says that if you're done, if you can't go on, if you're at the end of your rope, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So whenever you get into those dark and down places, and I do, remember, you have so much more left inside to give to yourself. One, and number two, we all have breaking points, but that breaking point is so much further down the road than you ever thought it was.
Wow, that's a really great, insightful answer. And that's amazing story too, to kind of hammer home the point there. We've all got, so much more than we think we do. And I guess part of it's also believing in that, that a lot of times we don't believe that, right? And we talk ourselves down, perhaps, that's where the mental health kind of challenges come into play. So Yeah, those are some, you've shared a lot of inspiring stories, and I just want to ask you, like, over the course of your, lifetime and the work that you've done, the people you've met, you must have met some really inspiring people. And I think you talked about little Navy SEALs. There's one Navy SEAL guy that I kind of know about, and I think you know about too, like David Goggins. He's one of these guys that are inspiring. But yeah, just wondering, who are the most inspiring people? Like, yeah, a couple of people that, off the top of your head that, kind of help kind of push you to, be who you are and do what you do.
I think that's for me a fairly easy question, and I really believe it started for me with my parents. I don't have my story is not one where my dad was an alcoholic and he beat my mom. That was not the case. My parents taught us, my brothers and I, the value of family, the value of caring for each other, loving each other, supporting each other, and they did what I used to call divide and conquer parenting, where Terry's got a game over here. Well, dad will go to that. Larry's got a practice over here. Well, mom will go to that. I mean, my mom would stay up late, washing all our uniforms and our practice stuff so that we always had clean stuff. She, like I said, she was always at the grocery store buying us food and stuff like that. So my parents really taught us, the value of what's important in life. And I remember when my dad was dying, I had my own job. I was working in the marketing department at Wendy's. But I was living at home, and I remember my youngest brother had a basketball game one night. I told my dad, I said, I'm not going to Brian's game. I'm going to go work out. I haven't worked out in a few days. And my dad looked at me. He's like, "No, you're not." I'm like, "What do you mean? No, I'm not. I'm 24 years old. I have a college degree. I have a job. I'm making my. What do you mean? No, I'm not." He's like, "No, you don't understand. Your brother needs you right now. Your brother is dealing with me dying. He needs your support." And my dad was absolutely right. I was just being a jerk, saying, "Hey, look at me. I'm my own man. I can do my own thing." Yeah, I can. But a real man would have been like, "Where am I needed the most? Where can I help the most?" And that was at my brother's game. So I ended up going to my brother's game and found a way to work out, at a different time. But my parents were the people who taught us what was really important in life. And I am incredibly thankful for that.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. So I think as we kind of close this podcast here, I like to leave things like on a positive note. And so I just want to ask you a couple of things. So what are you most hopeful for in the future, and what are you like most looking forward to in life? It could be anything. It could be personal or world changing, anything at all.
Yeah, I still go back to family. I in law enforcement, you see a lot of things that people shouldn't see, and as a result, there's a high suicide rate in law enforcement. There's a high divorce rate. There's a high incidence of drug and alcohol abuse. And I certainly had the opportunity. Hey, we're all going out to the bar after shift. You want to come with? Like, no, I want to go home. Want to be with my family. They grounded me. I realized that all the garbage that I saw, these were the people that I loved and cared about the most, and the people I wanted to be around the most. So find whatever that is that grounds you, that can kind of take the edge off that. It's not drugs, it's not alcohol, it's not stupid behavior. And young people think they're, look at me, I'm indestructible. You're not. I mean, I've been to too many cop funerals, either that have killed themselves or that have died in the line of duty. It's a sickening, horrible feeling to be at those funerals. So I think, for me, it's about family. I am incredibly hopeful. I've never lost hope that, the United States, and I know you're from Canada, so I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I think the United States is the greatest country in the world. I think that if you work hard, if you have a dream, if you have an ambition, you can be anything you want in this country. And I think you just look at the number of the millions of people that want to come into this country, that that want to immigrate here to the United States. They recognize that. They understand that. So I believe in this country. I believe in the people in this country. We got here, and we're in a kind of not a great place right now, but I really believe that pendulum will swing back to the middle somewhere, and we can all figure out how we can continue to move this country forward.
Wow, those are some great words to leave us with here. So, Terry, it's been awesome to have you here with us. And if anybody wants to, learn a bit about your work, about your book, and send some positive vibes your way, where can they do that? Where can they find you?
So I have a website, a blog. It's called Motivational Check, and every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about maybe how you could apply that thought into your life. On Mondays, I put up the Monday morning motivational message, which is usually a video or a story I find online. I have recommendations for videos to watch, books to read. My podcasts are on there. You can also leave me a note or a message at motivationalcheck.com.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing, Terry. And so that's we'll add those those notes in those key points on our show notes. So that's going to be a wrap for episode 1, everybody. Thanks for joining us today, and namaste, everyone.